In this video, we're going to talk about rejetting the carburetor on the Royal Alloy GT150. So we know this comes tuned for economy and all of that great stuff, but if we're going to do things like install a new exhaust system, transmission kits, those sort of things, we may want to go ahead and take this opportunity to richen up the mixture a bit and just see if we can't squeeze a little bit more power out. And we'll walk through what it takes to pull that carburetor off of its intake boot, off of the Airbox side. We'll look at how we rotate the carburetor so we can work on it. Of course, you could go through the whole process and pull the entire carburetor out of the motor up here. I find for me it was just easier to sort of disconnect some things and bend it. Made working on the carb a little bit less intense. We're going to disconnect the gasoline, so that means you probably don't want to be smoking or around open flames for this particular project. And what we'll do is we'll start looking at what tools we need, what parts we're going to have to order from Amazon, the beauty of the GY6, and then we'll go through and we'll start pointing out what we have to undo, where we have to do it, show you what the process is to put new jets in our Royal Alloy GT150. Taking a look at what tools we're going to need and what parts we're going to need for this project, pretty simple. You're going to need Phillips and a flat little short stubby screwdriver, or in my case, because I have big hands, what I've done is I've used my little Phillips head on my adapter just so I can have a little kind of thumb turn screwdriver. If you have smaller hands, you'll probably be getting away with this pretty easy. We're going to need a 7mm socket. We're going to need a small flathead screwdriver to unscrew our jets, and we'll talk about those in a moment. We're going to need another screwdriver or something that we can use to stuff in the gas hose to keep that gas from pouring out. Little pair of bent pliers here. I'm going to use those to disconnect some of the clamps on our hose connections inside the scooter. And then we're going to need our jets. Now these jets, these are from Amazon. I've circled the 38 jet and the 115 that are recommended for the Royal Alloy with my exhaust on it. It's actually recommended we put the 116 on, but you have to buy the 116 on its own. I bought a whole kit of 20 for very little money on Amazon. So we'll go ahead, let's take a look at one of these jets. So right here are our two jets, our pilot and our main. On the side of them, on the side of our long one here is going to be the number printed. So we can see it right there. That looks like a 52. And then we've got our other jet here, and printed there this is a 130. Now, as I mentioned, based on the recommendations, we're going to go ahead with a 38 and a 115 jet. But I wanted to pull two out just so we can look at them. And to make sure that your screwdriver fits the jets, make sure you've got a screwdriver that fits inside that notch nice and solidly, doesn't leave any big gaps. You know, these are brass jets, so they can be a little softer. But we'll go ahead and now start looking at what we have to do. Here inside our Royal Alloy is going to be our carburetor. Right over here, we can see the way it's sort of hiding behind all of this stuff. If you want, you can get up in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to be undoing this ring clamp here. And we're going to be undoing this ring clamp here to release our Airbox hose. And then to release over here from our intake manifold on the motor. Once we've got those off, we'll be able to rotate our carburetor forward like that and get to it and address the jets down there in the bottom at the float pole. Coming in from the other side, you can see there's plenty of things connected to the carb here, and disconnecting them and pulling the whole carburetor out means we're gonna have to rerun our throttle cable and do all of that good stuff. To make life easier, I just like to go ahead and rotate it. So the first thing we're gonna do is take our emissions canister here, pull it off, and just sort of tuck it out of the way. Now we can see in here, we've got a couple of hoses we have to disconnect. This is the first hose, that's our fuel line. So it runs all the way back here to our fuel filter. While we're in here, we can look and make sure, yeah, our filter's looking pretty clean. So, when we disconnect that, we're going to have gas coming out. And to plug that up, we're going to use screwdriver here, just slide it down the hose. So we'll go ahead, we're gonna start by removing that one, and then we'll look at draining, removing the float bowl drain hose, which we can see hiding right down there. And once we've got those hoses off, then we'll remove our clamps. Now what we're gonna do is come up in here, disconnect our gas hose. I'm gonna take a blue rag and just stuff that down here, because we know it is gonna start dripping. And we're gonna wanna have our screwdriver that we're using to plug that handy. So I'm gonna probably block the view here from the camera, but we'll see if we can't make this something that you guys can watch along with. So I'm gonna come in from the side, going to pinch our hose clamp and just slide it back. Now that our hose clamp is disconnected, we can go ahead and just pull the fuel line off, and it starts pouring fuel. So let's see if we can't show you. That's what it looks like when you plug the fuel line with a screwdriver. Keep it from leaking on anything. So you go ahead, set that off to the side. Make sure you keep a rag on it so it doesn't drip. Next, we're gonna have to go ahead and remove our float bowl hose right here. I should just be able to pop that off. It's got a little ring clamp that I didn't put back in since the last time I did this part of the project. And just like that, most of our carburetor's free, and we're gonna go ahead and remove our hoses. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna come in and we're gonna undo this screw. Now I mentioned you might be able to use a stubby screwdriver. I'm just gonna go ahead and use my little homemade finger screwdriver. And now all we're gonna do is just unscrew that Phillips head right there. For your purposes, it'll be much easier to come in this way. I'm just trying not to block the shot too much so you can see what's going on. And that's gonna let us slide our carburetor off of our intake manifold for the motor. Now you don't wanna let that screw come all the way out, because if you let it come all the way out, then you're gonna have to go ahead and get it relined up when you put it in. And it's important to note that this has a locating tab on our clamp, so it can only go in one direction. So we'll just go ahead and continue loosening that screw like that. And now we'll be able to go ahead and pop our carb right out there. Next, we're going to move on and we're going to remove the Airbox clamp over here, and then we'll be able to bend our carburetor, or rotate our carburetor out of the way. So this little guy up here, that's a 7mm bolt that holds the clamp for our Airbox on. So we're gonna go ahead and remove that and then pull our Airbox hose off of our carburetor. I'm gonna come in with my 7mm socket, put it on my little adapter just so I've got some leverage, and I'm probably completely blocking this shot for you, but we can see right here, I'm just loosening that. I could put this on a wrench if I wanted to, and loosening that all the way off so that I can grab my Airbox boot and I can pull it all the way off of my carburetor. There it is. We're going to try not to lose our clamp. It'll fall down, but we can pick that right up. And now, take that clamp, just put it off to the side. Now our carburetor is free on the back end, and we know that it's loose where it attaches to the motor. So what we can do is just wiggle it out like this, and just like that, we've got our carb free. Now that our carb is free, we're going to get our Airbox out of the way, rotate it up, and we're having access now right there to our float bowl. So this is our float bowl. We're going to undo these 4 screws, 1, 2, 3 back there, and 4 up there, and very gently remove our float bowl. Now we're draining some gasoline that was probably filled up there in the carburetor because I didn't run it out. So we'll just put our rag in there, soak up everything that dripped out, Forgot to warn you, as you do this, as you manipulate your carburetor, yeah, the gas that's stored up in there is going to pour out. Nothing too hard to worry about. We're not lighting any fires right now. But with our carburetor up, we'll go ahead and get ready to change out our jets. Now, if you spill your gasoline all over like we just did, grab your rags, wipe it off your workbench, your table, your ground, the bottom of the scooter. And the goal is just to make sure you don't have gas floating everywhere. Now, with our carburetor sort of flip turned on its side here, we're going to come around, and I'm going to try not to block the camera as much as I can, but we're going to undo all 4 of these screws here. And these screws let us take that float bowl off. So when the float bowl comes off, we want to be gentle with it, but we'll come back when that's ready. So we just come around, we undo these screws, and as they come loose, we just pull them off. Keep track of them. They do have a little washer on them. Unscrewing this bottom one. Now all that's left is this guy up here on the top, right here. And we're down to just our last screw up here in the top left. And now that that's off, our whole float bowl pops off the side. Got it here. Now you want to keep this seal in nice shape. You want to be very gentle with it. That's keeping the gas in your carburetor. There's our floats. And most importantly, we can see we have our jets now visible to us. So right here and right here are going to be the jets. They're factory jets. I forget what size they are, but we'll pull them out, and I'll show you how we do that now. Take a screwdriver. You want to be gentle. Remember, they're brass. Go ahead and unscrew that jet and pull it out. Now you want to be sure you don't just drop it, but if you do, you can pick it up. And here's our new jet. So we're going to grab our new one off of our workbench. Now in this case, that jet there is going to be our 115. So we take our 115. I recommend sorting them ahead of time like I did, so you can just pick it up off the table. And you can screw it in. And again, just like everything, we want to make sure it's tight, but we don't want to cross-thread it. We don't want to overdo anything. It's delicate. And once that's in there good, we're going to go down to our next one. We're going to unscrew that. But as that comes out, now we've got our other jet right here. And we're going to go ahead and swap that out for our 38 jet. So go over to the bench, pick that one up, take our 38 jet, feed it right back into the hole, just where it came from. Now you've changed the jets on your carburetor. Now we just have to put it all back together. Let's talk a little bit about our float bowl here. So if you've ever wondered how to drain your float bowl on the Royal Alloy, if anybody's ever told you, you're going to go ahead and you're going to use this screw here. You're just going to unscrew it. And what that does is that backs this little pin in here loose, which will let the gas flow in and then out through this, which is attached to our float bowl drain hose. So that was one of the hoses we disconnected, the one there on the bottom. We just take this, we make sure this float bowl lines up with our carburetor over here, and we're going to go ahead and put it back in place. Again, being gentle, because we do have that seal on there. Just mates up nice and easy right in here. So we can see how that mates up. And we're going to go ahead and put those 4 screws in to hold it in place. Now, when you're doing this, I recommend start with your top right screw on the scooter side, and then go ahead and do your bottom left screw over there. That just holds it in place nicely, makes it easy for us to continue working. We just go ahead, we tighten them all down nice and snug. They've got those little lock washers on them, so let the lock washer do its job. You don't need to put the torque of Zeus into them. Just bring them in nice and tight, seal up that float bowl. Once that's in, now all we have to do is put our car back in the correct orientation and connect our boots. Now, we had it kind of bent up in there, so we're going to go ahead and just work it back into place. Sort of getting it lined up with where it needs to go. Now we're looking at the scooter from the front just so I can give you an angle of what I'm doing as I zoom in here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to connect the intake manifold on the scooter to the carburetor there. So I'm going to come around to the other side. Hopefully you get to see what I'm doing. It's got that long snout on it. We just get it in place. And now that it's there, we're going to come around to the other side and I'm going to show you that clocking flange I was talking about earlier. So you can sort of see right up here, there's a little tab on the carburetor that slides into our intake manifold. And when I push it the rest of the way forward, you'll see it fit in. And that's how we know that our carburetor's aligned properly. So now that we're on our intake side, we're going to go ahead and take our little screwdriver again. And we're going to tighten up. You guys get to learn along with me. I decided to use a flathead bit on my little 1/4-inch drive wrench, and that lets me get in here and I can tighten this down just a little bit easier. So you can see, we're just going to go ahead and tighten that down. Now I'm going to go ahead and say, easiest way to loosen or tighten this for me is going to be this flathead bit on our 1/4-inch drive, and we just go right on in to our screw there. So right here, we've got our Airbox hose and our intake for the carb. Now we did remove that hose clamp earlier, so we've got that here. We're going to go ahead and get that hose clamp dropped onto our Airbox hose and orientate it in a way where we'll be able to put our 7mm here. So we take that and we're just going to get it socked on to our carburetor here. Now you can see we're getting a good tight fit. As I work that on and we check from all the angles, then we take our clamp, we put our clamp in place, and we're going to grab our 7mm socket on this guy down there. We're going to tighten them up. That's tight. We have to reconnect the hoses that we undid. In that case, we've got our fuel hose right here, and that's going to attach to this nipple. And then down here, we've got this little nipple there, and that is where our float bowl drain hose is going to attach. Now the float bowl drain hose, we just sort of kicked out of the way down here at the bottom. So there it is. See it peeking its little head up. So we'll go ahead and we're going to get that reconnected first. Pull it over. Hopefully we can get a decent little shot of it there. Like this. And get it connected. Once it's connected, you're going to pinch those clamps together and walk it up on the hose so that they will hold it in place. Once that's clamped, now it's time to do our fuel line. The fuel line, this is where it can get a little messy because we are going to have gas coming out. We've had it plugged with our screwdriver, covered in purple because who knows what else I've used this for. Go ahead and work that loose. Gas comes out. Just want to get the nipple on and over onto our carb. More dripping gas, so we just wipe it up. So we'll just come in. We're going to pinch those together. See if I can try to keep it focused where it's supposed to be. And as we pinch those, we're going to walk them up the hose. Once that's over the nipple, now our fuel line is clamped in place. We've got all our hoses reconnected. All we need to do in our case, because of the way we pulled that evap canister off and stuffed it back here, take our evap canister, reroute our little drain line. So that just comes and sticks out down there towards the bottom of the scooter. Pop that on. And we have now officially rejetted our Royal Alloy scooter. But it's a pretty easy process. It's a little fiddly. It's nerve-wracking to work on carburetors if you're not used to it, but Pretty easy thing to do, and hopefully this video helps. Now that we've gone through all of that, we've rejetted the carburetor on our Royal Alloy GT150. We've still got this bag of jets, including our old factory jets, which we just mix into the bunch, because if we're ever looking for these again, we're going to have to go through stupid little numbers on them anyway. Just to remind you, I went with the 38 and the 115. Make sure you clean up all your rags. You wipe up any gas that dripped underneath. Probably a good idea to let the scooter air out. If you're working in a closed garage like I am, open the garage, let it vent a little bit. Make sure everything's been snugged down. Make sure your intake boots are tight. We went through all of that in the video here, but hopefully this helps somebody out there who is a little nervous to work on a carb vehicle, particularly one of our scooters here. If you got questions, you can put them in the comments. More than happy to answer them or provide any advice I can based on my experience. Make sure this starts up and works. Turn our key on. We're good. We're rattling a lot of tools, but we've got it started, we've got it running. We'll go ahead, we'll clean up, we'll call it a day now that we've jetted our scooter. Thanks for watching.